I came home for New Year's and found my father alone, eating a sandwich with a hurtful note. We used your money to go to New York. Take care of it. I promised myself they wouldn't get away with it. 3 days later, they showed up at my door desperate. To give some context, our family has been broken for years. When I was 18, my parents divorced. My father, now 68, kept the family home. My mother, 65, moved into the apartment of my older brother, Esteban, 38, and his wife, Natalia, 36, on the other side of town. I moved away. I went to university and settled in another city, working in technology. Despite the distance, I always kept in touch with Dad, video calls, visits every 3 months, the usual. For their part, Esteban and Natalia always struggled with financial problems. Not because of a lack of work, but because of their lifestyle. They were constantly going into debt to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Designer clothes, luxury cars, expensive vacations, all bought on credit. For the past 10 years, Dad was their constant source of loans. At first, they borrowed small amounts, a few hundred for emergencies. But over time, they started borrowing thousands, and they never paid anything back. Basically, they drained their resources to support their irresponsible lifestyle. I arrived on New Year's Eve. The house was dark, with no cars in the driveway, the lights off, and the curtains drawn. I even doubted whether I had arrived on the right day. It was cold and silent inside. Only a dim light in the kitchen broke the darkness. There I found Dad, alone, eating a dry sandwich with a glass of water. No festive dinner, no decorations. Just him, in a freezing environment. The thermostat was at 14 degrees. I thought maybe they'd gone out to do some last-minute shopping, until I saw the notes stuck to the refrigerator. My jaw dropped when I read them. We used your money for New York. Take care of him this week. Just like that. They had taken the $650 that I myself transferred to Dad's account, clearly marked as New Year's dinner and gifts, and spent it on an impromptu trip to New York. They left him alone, with no food at home except bread, peanut butter, and expired deli meats. Dad didn't say much. He just nodded when I asked if he was okay. Then he leaned toward me and whispered, "You're going to regret this." In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Clarity. I didn't react with anger. Not outwardly. I simply prepared a hot meal for him, turned up the heat, and made his room comfortable. While ordering groceries on my phone, I saw an alert on her bank app. Insufficient funds for automatic mortgage payment. Then I realized it wasn't just a ruined holiday. It was something much deeper. I wasn't going to give them the show they were probably expecting. I planned something better. For the next 3 days, I started researching. It wasn't by chance. I'd had suspicions for some time. Last spring, I discreetly installed cameras in the house. Basic security, connected to my cell phone. Dad knew, but the rest of us didn't. I found out after noticing that some of his personal belongings were disappearing on each visit. His retirement watch, Mom's wedding ring that he kept, even his prescription medications. I checked bank statements forgotten in drawers, the Wi-Fi history, piles of letters. Each piece of the puzzle was a different story. And everything pointed to the same thing. Esteban and Natalia would come every few weeks from their apartment, empty the refrigerator, use the washing machine to save on utilities, and Dad's bank account would dwindle. Mom made everything easy for him. She told him it was his duty to help the boys, while she herself slipped money out of his pocket without him noticing. I remembered something from my visit 6 months ago. Esteban arrived showing off a brand new Audi Q7. He said he'd gotten a promotion. Dad complimented the car, and Esteban tossed him the keys. "Take it for a spin, old man. Just don't crash it." Dad refused, saying his joints hurt. That night I overheard him on the phone, bragging about having withdrawn another $5,000 from the pension fund, which the old man hadn't even noticed. That fund was what Dad had saved for years, and Esteban had somehow gained access to it. Again, Natalia came with her 17-year-old daughter, Clara, for Sunday dinner. Dad had been cooking all day. Natalia looked at the roast and looked down on it. "Isn't it organic?" I ordered food. She used Dad's credit card without asking. When he gently objected, she replied, "It's just money. It's not like you're using it for anything important." And they ate the takeout while the roast remained untouched. In my search, I found what I expected and more. A stack of overdue payment notices hidden in a drawer. Statements with charges in his name from electronic stores, upscale restaurants, and clothing brands he'd never even set foot in. In his browser history, emergency loans, reverse mortgages. The house itself was neglected. The heater filter hadn't been changed in over a year. Gutters were clogged, and the lawnmower in the garage was covered in dust. Esteban was paid $200 a month for property maintenance he never did. Dad had even missed 2 cardiologist appointments. The co-payments were $1.45, money he clearly didn't have. Meanwhile, his credit card showed a charge of $1,200 for a photo shoot for Clara's 16th birthday. When I placed all the documents on the dining room table, Dad looked at me without surprise. He just nodded. "How long has this been going on?" I asked him. "Years," he replied. "At first, it was just a few pesos. Then things got out of hand when Esteban got married. Your mother convinced me it was normal to help them." "Help them with what?" I thought. "Paying for the 4th vacation of the year?" Dad shrugged. "Esteban always has some emergency. Whether it's the car, an operation, or something that needs fixing. Last month, it was Clara's college fund. They said they needed to reserve her spot at New York University. The more she found out, the angrier she felt. But I kept it under control. I was methodical. I made copies of everything, took photographs, downloaded the recordings. By the 3rd day, I had enough to seriously interest any lawyer. I reviewed some recordings from Thanksgiving Day. They showed Esteban and Natalia arriving 2 hours late, staying just long enough to eat, and then filling several containers with the leftovers before leaving. According to Dad, they had told him they were meeting some friends for dessert. On the kitchen security camera, you could see Natalia rummaging through Dad's checkbook while Mom kept him occupied in the living room. We were just finishing lunch when they started banging insistently on the door. Loud banging sounds, mixed with agitated voices. The most recognizable was Esteban's. I checked the security camera footage on my phone. There they all were, Esteban, Natalia, Mom, and Clara, my niece, on the porch, each with suitcases. I opened the door, and they looked dreadful, exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes, a far cry from their usual elegant appearance. They were all talking at once, their sentences and explanations tumbling over each other. Natalia was the first to approach, a designer handbag hanging from her arm, a new Gucci one of those that cost around $2,800. Quite curious for someone who claimed to be penniless. "It's not what it looks like," she began quickly. "It was a misunderstanding. We didn't think you were actually coming." I didn't say anything. I simply stepped aside so they could see Dad, relaxed on the sofa, clean, warm, eating a hot stew while watching television. He didn't even look at them. The silence that fell was more powerful than any words. Clara rolled her eyes and started testing, completely oblivious to the drama. Natalia launched into a series of excuses about chaotic flights and canceled hotel reservations. Mom, trailing behind them, kept fiddling with her purse strap, avoiding my gaze. "We need help," Esteban finally said, glancing at his watch as if he had something urgent to do. Something's wrong with our accounts. The cards aren't working, and we can't access the travel app. It turns out they had planned the trip with my money, maxed out their credit cards, and now their lease was about to expire. They needed somewhere to stay while they sorted everything out. Esteban spoke as if it were a minor problem that I, as a good brother, should help solve. Our building has a serious leak, Natalia added, frowning. We need to stay here for a week or two. I noticed Clara was wearing new clothes, the tag still visible under the collar. What a difficult vacation, I thought. I let them talk. They vomited up every problem, every misunderstanding, every possible excuse. And then I told them the truth. I told them that the cameras in the house had been running since March, that I had records of all their visitors. Every time they left Dad with cold leftovers while they ordered expensive food from the car. Every time they rummaged through his medicine looking for painkillers. I have everything, I told him. Video, audio, screenshots of group chats synced with the kitchen tablet. The one they never knew was recording. Esteban's face went from arrogant to desperate in a matter of seconds. Natalia's fake smile vanished. Clara finally looked up from her phone, and Mom went pale. I have recordings of you too, I said, looking at Clara. Stealing $80 from Dad's wallet while he slept on Thanksgiving Day. For those concert tickets you needed. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then she looked at her parents, as if it were their fault for getting her into this. You had no right to spy on us, Esteban blurted out, now more furious than scared. That's illegal. Illegal? I laughed. Says someone who's been stealing from his own father. We weren't stealing. Natalia intervened sharply. We were borrowing. There's a difference. Did Dad know they were lending money when they forged his signature on the loan forms? I asked. There was an icy silence. Mom stepped forward, trying to mediate, as always. I'm sure we can work this out as a family. Your brother has been through a lot of stress. No, I interrupted her. You're guilty too. I have pictures of you taking money from Dad's wallet while he was asleep. Then Esteban lunged at me, grabbing my shirt. Damn sanctimonious fool! I shoved him hard. He tripped over the coffee table and knocked over a lamp. Don't touch me, I said calmly. That seemed to upset him more than if I had yelled at him. Natalia started shouting that I was ungrateful, that they had been taking care of Dad while I was busy with my own life. Clara joined in the chaos too, saying that I was ruining everything and that I was just jealous of the trip. Mom tried to get between us, pleading for calm. Dad just watched, his expression a mystery. Go away, I finally said. Everyone. Now. You can't kick us out of Dad's house, Esteban mocked. It's not your property. Oh no. I took out my phone. I have a temporary power of attorney since this morning. Dad signed the papers 2 weeks ago in case this happened. You're lying, Natalia said, though her voice was trembling. I showed them the document on screen. The house is out of their reach. The accounts are frozen. And the luxury SUV they've been using was reported stolen this morning. That's our car, Natalia protested. Really? It's in Dad's name. The ownership, the insurance, everything is registered with his information. And the payments were coming from his account. Technically, that's vehicle theft. Esteban clenched his fists, taking another step toward me. Go ahead, I said. Mom burst into tears, begging us not to fight. Natalia grabbed her bag and prepared to leave. Clara slammed her phone away, glaring at me. Esteban was trembling with rage until Natalia grabbed his arm. This isn't over, he muttered as they left. Actually, yes, I replied, closing the door behind them. I watched them through the window as they argued in the entryway. Esteban gestured desperately, pointing towards the house. Natalia typed nonstop on her phone. Mom wiped away her tears. Clara was already halfway down the street, as if she wanted nothing to do with them. After a few minutes, an Uber pulled up in front of the house, and the four of them got in. When they drove away, I turned to Dad. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly, then surprised me. "There's something else you need to see," he said. He stood up and gestured for me to follow him. He didn't go to the basement, as I thought, but to his room. He went to the closet, moved some old boxes, and revealed a small safe I'd never noticed before. He entered the combination with complete confidence, opened it, and took out an old green metal box. "I've been waiting for the right moment," she said as she handed it to me. "I thought I was going to die before I had the chance." The box weighed more than it looked. I carried it to the dining room table and carefully opened it, not knowing what I would find. Inside were papers, numerous bank statements, old checks, letters, and a typed timeline spanning almost a decade. At first, I didn't fully understand it, but later, as I began to notice the pattern, everything made sense. Irregular withdrawals, forged documents, loans in my father's name. They had been draining his finances for years, using his social security number to open credit cards, applying for payday loans he never knew existed and from which he never benefited. One of the most alarming documents showed Esteban as the CEO signing a reverse mortgage that my father never approved. The notary's signature was forged. It had been done by a friend of Natalia's who worked at an OPS store. According to the preliminary documents, had that mortgage gone through, they would have received around $175,000, leaving my father with virtually no equity in his house. Upon reviewing the bank statements, I discovered a clear pattern. Every time Natalia wanted a new car or a designer bag, mysterious withdrawals appeared in my father's accounts. And when Clara needed expensive clothes or the latest phone, Esteban forged her signature to take out loans. My mother's name also appeared repeatedly, signing as a witness on documents my father had never seen. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a life insurance policy they had taken out in my father's name 2 years earlier. Esteban was the sole beneficiary. The policy included a clause covering accidental death, but excluded suicide. The monthly payment of $267 was automatically deducted from my father's checking account. "How long have you been keeping all this?" I asked, astonished, as I reviewed the documents. 3 years, he replied in a subdued voice. "It all got worse when your mother moved in with him. I'd come here, hang out, and all the while they were going through my papers. That's why I started making copies of everything. Why didn't you tell me before?" I insisted, glancing at bank statements with charges from upscale restaurants and luxury stores. "At first I was ashamed," she admitted. "I couldn't believe my own son would do this to me. Then I got scared." Esteban has always had a bad temper. Last year, after I started transferring money to him directly, he used it to pay a lawyer. Month by month, he crafted his strategy. All this, waiting for a moment like this. "He always thought he deserved more than you," she said softly. "Even when they were children, he only took and never gave anything back." I found a note written by my father, tucked away among some papers. He had written it after a particularly serious incident the previous year. Esteban had come to ask him for $3,000 to repair his car. When my father hesitated, Esteban suggested that he might be developing dementia and that it would be best to consider a nursing home with medical supervision. "Dad, seriously, why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked again. "They threatened to cut off all contact," he explained sadly. "I thought I wouldn't see Clara again, that they wouldn't call me. I thought I could handle it on my own." I was wrong. Another document caught my eye, a medical power of attorney in Esteban's name, dated just 3 months prior. My father's signature looked shaky, strained. Did you sign this? I asked, showing him the paper. He shook his head. Esteban brought it one day when he had the flu. He told me it was insurance paperwork. I refused to sign it. He must have forged my signature afterward. I added it to the growing pile of evidence. Is there anything else I should know? I asked. He hesitated for a moment. Last month, Esteban started asking me a lot of questions about my medication. What do I take, and when do I take it? She said she was worried about interactions. A chill ran down my spine. We had to act. That same morning, I called my father's lawyer, a straightforward woman named Elena, who specializes in elder abuse cases. She arrived in less than an hour, reviewed everything, and was clear. This is a crime, she said as she organized the documents into neat piles. Identity theft, fraud, financial exploitation of an elderly person. We're talking about serious criminal charges. He explained the procedure to us. First, a police report, then a restraining order to protect my father and prevent them from approaching the house. At the same time, I would file criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for abuse and restitution. The criminal process will be slower, but with this evidence, I'm confident, he said. Pursuing both cases in parallel gives us the best chance of recovering what was stolen. The civil suit can proceed even if they reach a criminal plea agreement. How long will it take? Asked. The protective order will be issued within 48 hours. The asset freeze will take about a week if the judge grants the emergency request, and I believe he will. Criminal charges depend on the prosecutor, but I estimate around 30 days. The trial could be in about 6 months, although with this evidence, they'll probably accept a plea deal. My father firmly signed all the necessary documents. I just want what's mine back. Elena was clear. Theft of more than $100,000 is considered a Class B felony. The preliminary estimate indicated that approximately $215,000 had been stolen over the past 5 years, including bank withdrawals, fraudulent loans and credit cards, an attempted mortgage, and the theft of a vehicle. That number could increase as the forensic audit progressed. That same afternoon, we handed everything over to the police. 2 days later, a judge signed the restraining order prohibiting Esteban, Natalia, my mother, and even Clara from approaching within 150 meters of my father or his home. Esteban reacted violently. He started sending threatening messages, which we immediately forwarded to the police. My mother called crying, saying we were destroying the family. After the third call, we blocked his number. A week later, just as Helena had anticipated, we were at the civil hearing to request an asset freeze and file the abuse lawsuit. The judge reviewed our evidence and granted the injunction, freezing his accounts while the investigation proceeded. All of this happened before any formal criminal charges were filed. As we left the courthouse, Natalia was waiting for us in the hallway. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the tension in her face. When she saw me, she exploded. "Coward!" she shouted, pointing at me. "You're ruining our lives for nothing." Her voice echoed through the marble hallway, drawing glances. I kept walking, but she followed me with a determined stride. "We took care of him for years while you were away," she said scornfully. "You show up at one party, and suddenly you're the perfect son." I stopped. "You left him alone with a sandwich and a note. That's not caring." "It was just money," he shouted. "Stupid money he didn't even use. He just wanted to help us." A security guard approached as she raised her voice even more. "Do you think you're better than us?" she continued. "Esteban always said you were the golden boy, Daddy's favorite. Just so you know, he complained about you all the time. That you never visited him. That you abandoned him." Her makeup was starting to run down her face, distorted by rage. Some were already staring openly. "You're a miserable, spiteful wretch," She was about to continue, but a court officer firmly stepped in. You must lower your voice or leave the building immediately. Natalia turned to the officer, furious. Do you know what you're doing? You're ruining our lives. We can't even buy food. That's none of my business, ma'am, the guard replied coldly. This is a courtroom. Natalia shot me a hateful glare before spitting angrily. This isn't over. His words echoed those Esteban had spoken days before. Then he hurried away, inadvertently bumping into an elderly woman who could barely stand. The man, who had witnessed everything from a corner, placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, That's why we got the restraining order. They're falling apart. 2 weeks after the assets were frozen, my mother showed up unexpectedly at the house. I was preparing lunch when I saw her through the window, standing on the porch. She looked friendlier, older than I remembered. Nevertheless, I opened the door. You're violating the protection order, I told him immediately. I know, he replied in a subdued voice. But I needed to talk to you, please. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. After 5 minutes, I agreed. She nodded and clutched her bag tightly. I've been remembering when you were a child, you and Esteban playing in the garden, building those little forts. You were always so good to him, looking after your older brother, even when he didn't deserve it. I didn't say anything. It was the same old strategy, using nostalgia to manipulate. He's not a bad person, she continued. He's made mistakes, like all of us. Stealing over $200,000 from Dad isn't a mistake, I retorted coldly. It's a crime. She shuddered, but kept insisting. That wasn't it. I was just borrowing. Everything got out of control. Esteban has always had money problems, you know that? He needs help, not punishment. What you need are consequences. I corrected him. Please, his voice broke. This is a family matter. We shouldn't involve the justice system. Your father would never have wanted this to become a legal process. He loved Esteban. He loved us all. I felt a surge of anger. Don't tell me what Dad would want. You abandoned him. You went to live with Esteban and helped him steal from him for years. I didn't know if you knew, I interrupted. We have recordings of you distracting him while Natalia rummaged through his office. We also have documents with your signature, documents that Dad never authorized. You knew exactly what they were doing. She started to cry. Soft, calculated tears, the same ones that had worked for her with Dad for decades. I was wrong, I know. But please, can't we resolve this as a family? Withdraw the charges. We'll pay it back, I promise. With what money? With the accounts you've already emptied? We can find a solution. Esteban could lose everything. His job, his future. Think of Clara. She's just a child. Clara is 17. And she was involved too, I said. I have messages where she brags about taking money from her grandfather's treasure. Everyone knew what they were doing. My mother's tears vanished instantly. Her face hardened. You were always just as stubborn as your father. Time's up, I said as I closed the door. He'll never forgive you for this, he managed to say. Are you going to destroy your own family? Stay with that bitter old man? I let out a joyless laugh. Better alone with him than surrounded by thieves. I closed the door as she continued to protest and watched her through the window as she walked away, pulling out her phone, probably to let Esteban know I'd failed. I didn't tell Dad about the visit. He already had enough on his plate. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man introduced himself as Doug Reston, Esteban's former boss at Paramount Financial. Former boss? I asked, surprised. Esteban always talked about his work as if it were the foundation of all his success. Yes, Doug confirmed. I heard about the charges. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. Doug explained that Esteban had been fired 3 months before the New Year's trip for submitting false expense reports. He was requesting reimbursements for non-existent meetings, personal dinners disguised as business, and conferences he never attended. The company chose not to press charges in exchange for his resignation. We didn't want publicity, she added. But when I saw the news about the financial abuse case, I thought I had to speak out. This isn't an isolated incident. I asked him why he was calling me. Your brother mentioned you often, Doug said, always with a hint of resentment. He said you had it easier. When I saw your name on the news, I remembered. Doug offered to provide us with documents about the dismissal and the irregularities. This could strengthen the case, he said. It shows a pattern of behavior. I thanked him for his help and immediately called Elaine. She reacted enthusiastically. That's exactly what we need. It shows that it wasn't an isolated incident, but rather a pattern of behavior. I'll formally request the records, but his willingness to cooperate makes things much easier. With this new information, many things began to fall into place. Esteban and Natalia's desperation to get money from Dad, his absence from the apartment, they probably owed rent, and his insistence on that trip to New York. They weren't just greedy, they were drowning in debt. 3 weeks after Mom's visit, the prosecution filed formal charges. Esteban, Natalia, and my mother were accused of several crimes: identity theft, document forgery, financial abuse of an elderly person, and grand theft. They were ordered to surrender within 48 hours. Natalia was the first. She surrendered and paid bail immediately. My mother arrived later, looking stunned in the photo of her arrest. Esteban, on the other hand, showed up at the last minute, accompanied by a lawyer who seemed to be paid by the second. I thought that would be the last direct confrontation. I thought the legal process would run its course and we could begin to heal. I was wrong. That same night, while we were having dinner with Dad, a car pulled up abruptly in the driveway. I recognized the sound of the engine instantly, Esteban's Audi. Dad heard it too. He was left holding his fork in midair. Stay here, I said, getting up. I'll take care of it. Before I even reached the door, the banging started. Loud, full of rage, shaking the frame. I looked through the peephole. Esteban was there, distraught, his face red. I know they're there, I shouted. A Brano kicked down the door. I took out my phone and started recording. Then I opened the door without crossing the threshold. You're violating the restraining order, I said calmly. You must leave. To hell with your order, he muttered. He was drunk. Do you think you can ruin my life, get me arrested, and even turn my daughter against me? You did that all by yourself, I replied, keeping my tone calm. Leave before I call the police. He shoved me hard, sending me crashing against the wall. Where is he? Where is that ungrateful old man? Dad appeared in the doorway of the dining room, standing tall despite his age. Esteban, you must leave, he said firmly. He lunged at him. I stepped in front of him, and he pushed me harder. I almost fell. You're going to drop the charges, he ordered, pointing at Dad. Call your lawyer, the prosecutor's office. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Dad didn't flinch. He only said one word. But I had never heard him speak with such conviction. Esteban's face contorted with anger. He grabbed my shirt and shoved me hard against the wall. This is your fault. You turned him against me. My father reacted with a speed I'd never seen him possess. He grabbed Esteban's arm and pulled him away from me with unexpected force. Don't you ever touch my son again. Esteban turned around, surprised for a moment. I couldn't believe that our father, at 68 years old, had intervened. But his face hardened again. He pushed Dad back. That was the end of it for me. I lunged at Esteban and knocked him down. We both fell to the floor. hitting a side table in the struggle. He was bigger, but I was sober, with only one goal in mind, keeping him away from Dad. A voice called from outside. "Is everything all right in there?" It was our neighbor, a retired policeman who still kept up his watchful eye. "Call 911, I yelled. Esteban tried to get up, but then he realized the situation had gotten out of hand. I immobilized him. "You're not going anywhere," I told him. 5 minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived with their sirens blaring. The officers entered with their weapons drawn, quickly assessing the scene. They separated us, took statements, and reviewed the video I had recorded on my phone. I explained that he had violated a restraining order and assaulted us. I showed them the bruise that was already forming on my arm. They handcuffed him and took him away. As they were putting him in the patrol car, one of the officers turned to me. "We'll need both of you to come to the police station to give formal statements. It's very likely they'll revoke your bail." I nodded and looked at Dad, who was still standing in the doorway. He had a small cut on his forehead where he'd hit the wall, but otherwise he seemed fine. He showed neither sadness nor anger, only determination, as if a weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "I'm fine," he replied. "It's over now." The legal proceedings moved with the slowness and tedium typical of such cases. The amount of evidence against Esteban was overwhelming, and the new charges of assault and violating a restraining order led to his bail being revoked. He would await trial in the county jail. The forensic accountant finished her report. The total amount of money stolen was $287,450. It included unauthorized credit card charges, cash withdrawals, fraudulent loans, a forged reverse mortgage, unauthorized vehicle purchases, and outright theft of personal property. Traces of money sent to accounts abroad were found, where Esteban had apparently hidden some of the funds. The sums weren't large, but they were enough to demonstrate premeditated intent. 2 months after his arrest, Esteban accepted a plea deal with the prosecution: 3 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and full restitution. Mom received 2 years of probation and community service. Her participation was considered less active, though still relevant. She was ordered to return $42,000 of the total amount stolen. Natalia, for her part, resisted the accusations for longer, but she too ended up accepting a deal: 18 months in prison and repayment of the money. Unlike Esteban, she was allowed to remain free until her sentencing date. However, the day before turning herself in, she sold the few assets the court hadn't frozen, filed for divorce from afar, and disappeared to Florida with a man she had met. She abandoned Clara, her daughter, without looking back. An arrest warrant was issued, but Florida authorities were slow to locate her. Clara, 17, was not prosecuted. Despite being aware of what had happened, the prosecutor considered her a minor influenced by her parents, not an active accomplice. Although we all knew he had profited from the fraud, he received a minor penalty: 200 hours of community service and attendance at ethics classes. The civil suit Dad filed for elder abuse was decisive. The court ordered restitution of the $287,450 stolen, plus interest and punitive damages, bringing the total to $375,000. The court also ordered the sale of assets, garnishment of future wages, and liens on any assets he might acquire. It would take them decades to pay everything back. 3 weeks after Natalia's escape, he received an email from a woman named Kendra, Natalia's estranged sister. He had only met her once, at the wedding. She told me she'd seen the news about Natalia escaping before her sentencing. "It doesn't surprise me," she wrote. "She's done it before." Intrigued, I called her that same night. She told me that Natalia had a history of financial fraud dating back to her teens. At 20, she emptied her parents' retirement savings. She had asked them to include her in the accounts to help them manage them. 6 months later, the money was gone, and so was she. She had done the same thing with her first husband before Esteban. Kendra hadn't spoken to her in years, but she remained in contact with people who knew her. One of those people had recently seen her in Naples, Florida, sharing photos of shopping and beaches on a private account. "I have her new address," they told me. "It's the right thing to do to give it to you." Kendra explained that she had always felt guilty for not warning Esteban. She tried to do so at the engagement party, but he thought it was sisterly jealousy. After that, she distanced herself. I thanked her for the information and sent it to Elaine. Within a few days, she had coordinated with the Florida authorities. The arrest warrant was updated to include flight to avoid trial. Natalia's history helped strengthen our case, demonstrating a pattern of behavior. "This is crucial," Elaine said. "It shows that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a planned scheme. If they find her, it will greatly influence the sentence." 3 weeks later, Natalia was arrested at a luxury store in Naples. Her new boyfriend knew nothing about her criminal record and immediately distanced himself upon learning of it. Natalia was extradited and faced her original sentence, as well as new charges for evading justice. Throughout this entire process, Dad remained calm. The anger one might expect never surfaced. She displayed only a quiet resignation, a silent sorrow for what her family had become. 3 months after that New Year's Eve, we were sitting on the porch. The neighborhood was calm. There were no suspicious cars on the street, and no one made a fuss when they knocked on the door. Dad handed me a thick envelope. Inside were the property transfer papers. The house, the investments, everything. I had already registered it with the county office. "This house almost got lost twice," he said. "Once through the bank, and once through my own son. It won't happen again." I told him I didn't need it. It was enough for me to know he was okay. He shook his head. "I've watched them both since they were children." Esteban was always asking. "You were always there. This house should stay with someone who understands its value." 9 months have passed since then. Esteban is still in state prison. Mom went to live with her sister, repentant, yes, but no longer welcome in our lives. Natalia is serving her sentence, and the judge was anything but lenient after her escape attempt. Clara has improved considerably. With her aunt, she finally has rules and structure, something her mother never offered her. Dad is slowly rebuilding his life. He's started getting involved in community center activities, and he's even taken up gardening again, something he loved in his youth. He met a kind woman with whom he now shares long walks in the park and leisurely afternoons over coffee. Her demeanor has become calmer, lighter, as if she had finally released a burden she carried for far too many years. For my part, I made some adjustments in my life. I reduced my business trips, adapting everything so I could be more present. I spend several days a week at the house, making sure it never again becomes a place of tension or danger. Dad insists that this home now has a different meaning, and not a day goes by without him reminding me of it. Sometimes, on quieter evenings, we bring the chairs out onto the porch, talk little, but understand a lot. There are no more shouts, no more threats, no more panic. Only the serene silence of those who survived a family storm and learned to rebuild themselves from the rubble. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise, but with peace.